Hello, and welcome to Labor Talks. Today's special guest is Beverly Wickstrom. Beverly is an attorney with, is it Gingras? Gingras, Cates, and Walks. Welcome to Labor Talks, Beverly.
Thank you so much for having me.
We want to tell our viewers a little bit about you and what areas of law do you specialize in?
Well, I practice in the Eau Claire office. We used to be Ritchie, Wickstrom, and Walks. We were Ritchie, Wickstrom, and Walks for 17 years, and last summer had an opportunity to merge with a group that has offices in Madison and Waukesha. So we're able to offer a lot more for our clients now. We offer everything from employment law to help with people who are injured. And my particular focus is helping people who've been injured in car crashes, by medical malpractice, by something mechanical like your appliance that malfunctions. And also I do Social Security, helping people who are disabled, and workers' comp, helping people who are injured on the job.
Okay. And is there any particular one that you really liked more so than the other as far as a concentration? Do you prefer working workers' comp? Do you prefer working disability?
You know, I enjoy them all. My heart is with helping people who are in a bad place in their lives, and I'm able to do that in all three of those areas. So I really can't say that I like one more than the other. It all gives me the same satisfaction.
Because you're helping people.
Exactly.
And I know you help a lot of working families. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Most of my clients are from working families, and what we've experienced is that with the economy the way it is, with wages the way they are, most of us are one injury, one disability, one car crash away from financial disaster. And so a lot of people get into that situation very quickly after a bad thing happens to them and come to me to see if I can help them through the system and triage and try and get them into a better position.
Well, and especially when I work in an insurance company, and when you have younger people that feel they never need anything else because they're never going to die, they're never going to get hurt. And if that young person gets hurt, and if they have a young family, that's a lot of lifetime left that's going to be affected by what steps they take when they get hurt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other aspect of it is that with high insurance premiums, high insurance deductibles, many people literally cannot figure out how to afford to pay for the care they need. And that's a big issue.
And they don't understand what COBRA is.
Right.
If they can't work, obviously they can't keep their jobs. And if their benefits were provided by their job, you know, they've got to find a way to keep that going because obviously they need it now that they've been hurt.
Right.
And COBRA insurance is expensive.
It's exceedingly expensive, and most people, if they're not able to work, can't afford the mortgage, can't afford food, much less an insurance premium.
And Republicans are targeting Social Security, Medicare. What do working families need to know about the tactics that they're taking?
Well, let me talk about Social Security first, because that's probably the simplest one to talk about. There's a lot of pushback from the people in the United States against changing Social Security. So that's not taking a lot of traction right now. And basically what's being talked about that is getting any traction whatsoever is changing Social Security, not for people who are current beneficiaries, but for people who will get on it in the future, either through disability or through retirement. And how that change would happen is very much up in the air because we haven't seen any specific bills. There's been some talk of reducing benefits. There's been some talk of an income or asset test to determine whether you get Social Security benefits.
Changing the age.
Changing the age. Exactly.
I'm in my 50s, so obviously that's something that's I'm hoping will be there for me. I think a lot of the scare tactic is in telling people that it won't be solvent. And so they need to take steps to make sure that they're taken care of in case it won't be there. But they need to know that it's not as bad a shape as they think it is.
I think that's very true. But it can easily be made to be a problem if certain things are done by the Congress. So I think we all have to be watching vigilantly to make sure that doesn't happen.
And what about Medicare?
Medicare is a much bigger problem. working families should be very, very worried about those changes. Paul Ryan has indicated that that's one of his top priorities for 2018. And again, we don't know exactly what's going to be done because we haven't seen the bills, but we do know what's being talked about. What's being talked about falls into a couple of categories. The big one basically involves increasing the cost to the people who participate in Medicare. So that could be increasing copays, having increases in deductibles, increasing the premiums that you pay for Medicare. There's talk about completely changing the other plans that you can buy outside Medicare, maybe eliminating those, which would be a serious problem, of course. They're talking about having different levels of benefits depending on income. So all of those financial changes could be quite serious because people who are on Medicare typically don't have another place to turn to get money to pay for health insurance benefits. That's why Medicare was begun. It was quite controversial when the United States started Medicare, but it was begun because as we age, our bodies start to deteriorate, we start to have more medical problems, we start to be more expensive to heal and to fix and to treat. And so older people and people with disabilities were having an impossible time finding any place to buy insurance, and it was creating a huge issue in the country. And we're slowly edging to a point with the proposed changes in Medicare that will be there again. So some of the other potential changes would include making it potentially a premium support program. So what that means is you would get a certain amount of money each month, and that money would go toward your purchase of a health insurance policy.
And as we know, most people are not educated on what they need for a health insurance policy.
Exactly.
So we're going to be in major trouble. I feel that way. As we see the VA, or the people, my sister and brother are Vietnam-era vets, and my sister has been without her sleep machine that broke for almost a year. And every time she has an appointment, they cancel it just before the appointment's supposed to be and have to reschedule it far out. I can see that same type of thing happening if they make all these types of changes with Medicare.
I agree. I think it's a potentially disastrous situation for anybody who decides to retire or has to retire, is disabled, has major health needs. I think there was talk about the Affordable Care Act potentially rationing health care. I think this type of proposal will effectively ration health care for a large number of people.
And what I meant about their tactics, too, is that they seem to be doing a lot of their planning behind closed doors.
They do.
They seem to be doing a lot of their planning at night or calling for votes at night when people aren't there, kind of like what happened with Act 10 in Wisconsin. Is there any way that the voters or the people out there can get to know what they're proposing before it gets there?
You know, I'm not aware of anything. If the Republicans choose this to do this behind closed doors in a caucus, for example, they can do it. That's legitimate. It's not something that I view as a democratic way of proceeding, but it is something that's allowed under the current system. So
they're certainly not working across the aisle.
They are not working across the aisle. No. And I think anytime the Democrats get wind of what's going on, they certainly make the citizens aware of it. So we at least have that little bit of information trickling out. But for the most part, we anticipate that the changes will be negotiated in silence and rushed through.
Well, and the other part is the blacking out or the media, and not letting them know what's going on. I watched the 7 hours of hearings for the Affordable Care Act, and certain news media only put out one or two things that they wanted, and whether they were true or not. And so you got a whole country full of stirred up people that don't know what they're voting on, don't know what's really going on.
Exactly. We're being deprived of a lot of information. That's why organizations like where we're sitting right now and the ability of that type of community television outreach or public television outreach is so important to that whole education process, the whole learning process, so we can figure out what is going on. Is it something we want, something we don't? Should we reach out to our senator and congresspeople about it?
And I know another scary thing that they were trying to do this last year was making changes to workers' compensation.
Yes.
How would those proposed changes affect working families?
Well, there's some really big proposed changes. Let me start by telling you about Assembly Bill 308, which is proposing to change the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. Now, that's a lot of legal gobbledygook until I tell you tell you what that really means. But Wisconsin has had a pretty stable workers' comp system for decades. And one of the reasons for that is that changes to the workers' comp system are recommended by the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. It's a group that's currently comprised of 5 employer representatives, 5 labor representatives, 3 non-voting insurance company representatives, and somebody appointed by the Secretary of the Department of Workforce Development. So what that means is that labor and management essentially have been negotiating these changes and reach a compromise, and have done that for years and years and years. And the legislature has been good about accepting those compromises. So what the result of that is that we don't see the wild swings in our workers' comp system depending on what party's in power. So while we have seen swings in the last 8 years, significant swings in things based on the party in power in other areas of the law, we haven't seen that in the workers' comp system. So what's being proposed is that right now the 5 representatives are labor union representatives, people who are skilled in negotiating, people who know the issues, people who understand workers' comp inside and out. And what the proposal is to narrow that so that there are a minimum of 2 labor representatives from unions, depending on how many people in the state, how many workers in the state are represented by unions. And then the other slots are filled by the Secretary of the Department of Workforce Development with people that the Secretary thinks would be good to be on this committee, regardless of skill level. There are no requirements of knowledge, no requirements regarding skills, no requirements about negotiating experience or anything. So that's a bill that is, as I said, it's in the Assembly. It's been approved by a couple of committees. It's, I believe, in the Rules Committee right now, if I'm correct. Whether it will see the light of day in for a vote is very much an unknown right now. We only have 2.5 months or so before they hope to end this session. So my fingers are crossed that that's not going to go any further, but that is something that's out there as a big concern.
And allowing employers to designate doctors?
That's something that the management side has been pushing for a long time. Basically what they're proposing is that management will be able to select X number of doctors. Some have to be in your area. Others don't necessarily have to be in your area, but management can say this is where you have to go if you were injured on the job. There isn't an accompanying caveat that management has to pay for that. So if you, Laurie, were injured on the job and I was your boss, I could say you have to go to a doctor that's outside your health insurance plan, that you don't have any contacts with, that may not be the kind of specialty that you think you need for your situation, but I have the right to control where you go.
And if insurance doesn't cover it, then it's out of their pocket. Is another way for the employer to hope that that person drops their case, drops their suit?
Sure, absolutely. That's part of the hope. And the concern, obviously, for those of us who represent injured workers is that there may be unscrupulous doctors who may say, this is a good source of income from this particular employer. We're going to keep saying what the employer wants us to say rather than treating the employee.
Where the employee should really come first.
Exactly, exactly.
And what is the proposed part about reducing the statute of limitations?
So right now, there's a very generous 12-year statute of limitations for workers' comp injuries. As long as you let your employer know you've had the injury and make the initial claim within 2 years, you have basically 12 years to see how your injury is going to pan out. And you may have a situation where you're not going to need surgery immediately, but the doctor's telling you in a few years you're going to need surgery for this. You may need a knee replacement for this in 5 years, but we don't want to do it yet. Well, that 12-year statute of limitation allows you to follow the doctor's advice on waiting and getting care at the appropriate time. So if the statute of limitations is reduced, and they're talking about reducing it to 2 years, then then obviously that would no longer be a possibility.
And the medical fee schedule?
That's something that's really controversial. It's supported by employers, and it was part of the bill that labor and management agreed to for 2017. But basically, it is going to say, if it passes, a doctor will be paid X dollars for this procedure. And I have to tell you, the one that was proposed is a proposal to pay a percentage of the amount that's paid by Medicare. So not even the full Medicare rates, which are 25 or so cents on the dollar, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but less than that. And obviously the medical community is quite concerned about that. And the rebound concern that I have as somebody who represents injured workers is that doctors may just say, I'm not going to treat people in workers' comp situations because
I'm not going to be paid it.
Right.
Because will
right.
that land in the fees that are above usual and customary, where the patient is not responsible for it, the doctor's supposed to eat it? Is that's what they're looking at? Right. Is they're going to end up getting paid a lot less for their
right.
for their work?
Exactly. Exactly.
So another way to try to force people to drop a workers' comp claim would be there isn't any doctor around that can treat you or do what you need done. You don't
Right.
can't have that shoulder surgery. You can't have that neck surgery or.
Exactly, exactly. Trying to push people to health insurance if they have it, or pushing people to a point where they don't get the care.
And repetitive motion injuries seem to be targeted. Can you explain what I'm talking about with repetitive motion?
Yeah, repetitive motion injuries are close to the most common type of injury that we see. And it's the type of injury you get when you do the same thing over and over and over. So we see it in a lot of factory workers who are making the same motion many times over the course of a day, a week, a year, a lifetime of work. We see it a lot in laborers who are lifting heavy things and are slowly and surely injuring their back, shoulders, and neck. But it's not one thing that happens at a particular time. You don't necessarily fall and break your leg. That's not a repetitive motion type thing. It's something that comes on over a long period of time when your body's stressed.
Like carpal tunnel.
Exactly.
That type of thing.
Exactly.
And yet, on the other hand, they aren't working hand in hand with some place like OSHA to help offset and stop those repetitive motion things from happening.
Right. Some employers are very good about it and some are not.
Like the mats or the ergonomic desks and the keyboards and the different types of things that they can be providing, even something so simple as a copper elbow thing.
Right, exactly. Or switching positions. You know, some factories in this area have people at one station for an hour or two, then they move to a different station and so on, so they're not literally doing the same thing over and over and over. And that's an easy accommodation that can be made, but many employers don't make those accommodations. And for those employers, they're going to have repetitive use injuries in their employees.
And just thinking about the new changes that they want to do for child labor, that's obviously going to affect workers' comp in the long run because these kids are getting into the workforce that much sooner.
Right.
And I grew up on a family dairy farm, okay, and I could work on that family dairy farm, and I got hurt on that family dairy farm. That's obviously going to, like I said, on how are we going to cover workers' comp on children?
It's a huge problem. And children are exposed to hazards that they should not be exposed to at a time where they're not necessarily intellectually capable of recognizing the hazard and taking steps to avoid it.
Working around machinery.
Exactly.
I was run over by a tractor when I was 7. My brother was 9 who was driving. Okay, those are types of things that should not, I mean, I can say firsthand, should not be happening. And when you have these great big factory farms, and if they've got kids on their farms, that in their family, that's kind of a lot of what's been targeting is that if your parents have a dry cleaning store or a hardware store, they can be working in those stores instead of being in school or outside extracurricular type things that they could be doing as a student.
Right.
I can see that the workforce, the problems are going to be mounting that much more because of them coming in.
I think they will, both in terms of injuries and in terms of the things they miss in terms of their educational and social development, which will have a ripple effect as they try and compete in the workforce down the line.
How do we keep educated on the changes, especially when they're so secretive?
It's not easy to do. People who are lucky enough to be members of unions have their unions keeping an eagle eye on this type of thing and will get information from their unions. But for workers who aren't in a union, there are a couple sources that I would recommend. WIS Politics does a very nice job of keeping pretty close to real-time information on their website about what's happening. And they send out a very regular email as well. It's just WIS Politics, WISPOLITICS. If you Google it, you get right to their website, and they can give you, and you can search for information on the issues that are important to you. The Wheeler Report is a little more difficult to navigate, but they also do the same thing, and they have a lot of good links to actual texts of bills and video or articles that help explain things that are going on. And then the Democratic Party has a once a week, basically what's happened in Madison type thing that it emails out, but it's to members. So if you're a member of the Democratic Party, you would get it. But it does involve, you've got to work for it. It's not something that we get, that we have any way of getting easily.
What else can we do to help and fight to preserve our basic rights? Because I look at these as basic human rights.
Well, I think we have to be active in politics. We have to know what candidates stand for. We have to get out and vote. We have to continue to talk with our legislators, our congresspeople, our senators. Write, call, email, text, communicate what you think. Get educated about what's going on, and tell people what you think about it.
And vote.
Vote. That's the biggest thing. The biggest thing. We have very small voter turnout compared to the eligible voting population, and if we're going to make a difference in this, workers need to get out and vote for workers' rights.
They need to understand that their vote does count. When you've got several spots now that have been settled by a draw of a name out of a hat because the vote was tied, because there were hardly any votes out there, that's sad. I mean, they need to know that they are the first line. They have to fight for themselves.
That's very true. That's very true. We've got examples locally where 1 or 2 votes have made the difference in a local election or in a legislative race. So every vote really does count. I can't reiterate that strongly enough.
And you're the head of the Eau Claire Dems.
I chair the Eau Claire County. Yep.
If someone wants to join, how do they do that, and where are you guys located?
Our resource center is at 440 Broadway Street, so just off Water Street in basically the downtown area of Eau Claire. And we're open right now from 10 until 2, Monday through Thursday, so anybody's welcome to stop by. But if you're not available in those hours, you can certainly call our number and leave a message, and someone will get back to you. If you want to join on the state level, that may be easier for some people. You can just go online, Democratic Party of Wisconsin. There's an online sign-up location, and you can become a member of the party.
Do you see a coinciding thing that when you've got the Dems are here, and then now you've got the Wisconsin Progressives, and you've got Working Families Party, which is like down in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that part of the reason they're pulling away is they don't feel that they're getting enough hearing with the Dems, the Democrats? Like Minnesota has the Democratic Farm Labor Party. Mm-hmm. So does Canada. So does a lot of Europe. Mm-hmm. I'm a big proponent of that. My husband works in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So is there any chance that we can do that and bring them all back in so that we're all fighting the same battle?
Well, I can tell you that at least locally, we are all working together. And I don't feel the type of division that people feel in some other places. All of the groups that are working on particular projects are also working with us as Democrats to help elect people who will do the things in the legislature, the Senate, et cetera, that we feel jointly are very important. So I don't think our ultimate ideals differ. I think that we're doing a really good job of working collaboratively with each group, doing what it's strongest at.
Good. Good. Now, outside of work, personally, I know you are involved with art photography. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I started doing photography when I was just a little kid. My dad or my grandpa gave me one of those box cameras, the old-fashioned kind that you look down in and you see a picture and you have to hold the camera really carefully and you push a button and eventually you'll get a little square black and white photo of something. And I just really have always enjoyed it. It's been a good creative outlet for me, and now as I've got the stresses of doing some stuff in politics with the Democratic Party and working as a trial lawyer, it's good to have that creative outlet to just keep me thinking about things more creatively.
And relaxing, and your stress reliever,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And you've
exactly.
been involved in a couple of shows too.
I have
correct,
been.
with your photography.
Yes,
That's
yes.
awesome. So I hope that gets out there. Get it to us a little bit more so we can help publicize it for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think we've covered it very well, but I think the bottom line that I hope anyone listening to the show walks away with is vote. Please vote.
And Dana, who is one of your partners and your husband,
Yes.
right, is one of the candidates running for governor for the state of Wisconsin.
Yes.
And I know he's been extremely busy with fundraising and everything. If anybody wants to get involved with his campaign, how do you have information available where they can do that?
Yeah, you can contact him online at danawalks.com, or if somebody wants to call me at our law office, Gingers, Cates, and Walks, I can certainly point anyone in the right direction.
And we hope to have him on here as a future guest as well. And I know there's a couple of gubernatorial debate type things that are coming up, or forums coming up. Citizens Action will be housing one or having one in February.
Yes.
And I hope to be there for that, and we hope he does well. We wish him well.
Thank you.
That is today's program. My thanks to our viewing audience and to Beverly Wickstrom, who made today's program possible. My thanks also to the folks working behind our cameras over here at Valley Media Works, and who not only make the show possible, but give us an outlet for our union and working family voices. A way that I'm reminded a lot by the guys here that they're not media. They're just making sure that it's there so that people can participate and be part of it. A final note, Labor Talks is on channel 993 twice weekly. And you can also use your favorite search engines with keywords Labor Talks and CVC TV and find us on YouTube. And we thank you for tuning in today.
Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.